Hi, Steve Sabludowsky, publisher of Bayoubuzz.com, and we'll finish this incredible legislative session, special session. Now, am I correct, the president of the Louisiana Budget Project?
The director of the Louisiana Budget Project.
Okay, Louisiana Budget Project. So why don't you, if you don't mind, give me some background about the project.
The Louisiana Budget Project has been around since 2006. I've been in this position since 2011. We do public policy research and advocacy on public policy issues in Louisiana and how they affect low and moderate income families in particular.
Okay. Now, before that, you were actually reporting for the Times-Picayune, and your focus was on the legislature. Am I correct? So you have a lot of experience in there.
From 2003 till 2011, covered the state capitol, covered the state budget, a lot of healthcare policy issues, and of course governor's races, U.S. Senate races, that kind of thing.
Sure, absolutely. So with that background, why don't you, if you don't mind, give us an idea in terms of now that the special session is over, how would you describe it? How would you rate it?
I think it was a very disappointing end to the session. You know, the legislature had three distinct jobs that they had to get done. Difficult jobs, but distinct jobs that they had to do in 25 days. The first was solve the mid-year shortfall. There was a $900 million gap between revenues and expenses in the current fiscal year, and they had to find either the cuts or the tax revenue to fill that gap. Second was a $2 billion shortfall next year. This is the budget they're going to be working on this spring. There was a $2 billion gap. And the third and most important is to fix the long-term structural deficits that have been plaguing state government for years and years now. Out of those three things, they barely accomplished the first, and they certainly didn't accomplish the second and the third objective. We find out today that they were anywhere from $30 to $50 million short of filling the current year budget shortfall, so they didn't accomplish that job. They're at least $800 million short next year, so there's going to be more budget cuts to healthcare and higher education that they're going to have to contemplate during the regular session that starts on Monday, and they did absolutely nothing or extremely little to fix this long-term structural deficit. Most of the tax increases that they did pass have expiration dates, have sunset dates on them, so that means that these long-term structural issues are completely unresolved. We're going to be back here next year, the year after that, and the year after that, talking about ways to fix the structural deficit. So the legislature, frankly, did the absolute bare minimum that was required of them. They barely even did that, and they have a lot of work to do to fix this.
Well, you know, obviously we have a political chasm. You know, we have a great divide. And, you know, obviously with the Republicans controlling the legislature, the governor controlling the administration, and with your experience, of course, you know how all that works. I mean, can we really anticipate trying to fix the problem, the long-term problem, the problem for this, let's say the problem for this upcoming fiscal session? This upcoming session, which is not a fiscal session, as you mentioned, $800 million. I mean, I don't see a solution. I see the polarities just being too great. Your thoughts?
Well, they don't have a lot of choices in the session coming up because, again, it's not a fiscal session. So even if they wanted to raise revenue during the next 3 months, the Constitution won't allow it. So they have two choices. They can either make $800 million worth of cuts, or they can find one-time revenues, you know, through kind of tricks and slush funds or whatever means that they can find. I'm not sure there's even anywhere close to $800 million in one-time revenues available, even if they wanted to find it. So I think what we're going to see is in the next couple of days, maybe as early as tomorrow, Governor Edwards is going to present a new version of the executive budget. You know, he released an executive budget in February, like the law requires him to, and that was a budget with $2 billion less than the state needed. And it was a draconian budget, and everybody knew that that was the budget that neither the governor or the legislature wanted to pass. Now we're going to see what a budget looks like with $800 million less. And so there's going to be severe cuts. It's going to affect colleges. It's going to affect healthcare services. It's going to affect a lot of basic services that people care about. And we're going to see what the legislature does with that. There's not, as we learned during this session, there aren't a lot of easy places to cut. Don't forget that Bobby Jindal spent 7 years, the last 7 years of his administration, cutting this budget. So the easy cuts were made long ago. The slightly difficult cuts were also made long ago. We are cut down to the bone, and I think legislators, if they learned one thing during the session, it's that cutting the state budget isn't as easy as it sounds or as it looks during a campaign.
Now, there are some people, Treasurer Kennedy, for an example, and I've been very critical of Treasurer Kennedy lately. Number one, he totally underestimated what the budget shortfall was by 40 to 50%. And he also said that we did not need to raise taxes. The Republicans raised taxes. They control the legislature. They raise taxes. So do they have a conflict with Treasurer Kennedy? Kennedy's saying, hey, you don't need to raise taxes. They did.
Well, I think Treasurer Kennedy, frankly, he's been talking about these issues for years and years. We have to remember Treasurer Kennedy is running for the U.S. Senate, and Treasurer Kennedy doesn't have to vote on taxes or budgets. So I think it's easy, frankly, for people who don't have to vote and who have to make these trade-offs to tell the legislature what to do. You and I are in the same role. We're always telling the legislature what they should do. It's the legislators who got elected, who represent constituents, who really have the difficult choice. And I think what we learned this session, because the state isn't the federal government, they have to have a balanced budget, that there are some really difficult trade-offs. This would have been a difficult budget for Governor Edwards to manage, even if there hadn't been a decline in oil prices. But we have to remember that from July 1st of last year until February 10th of this year, the state shaved more than $1 billion off its revenue forecast. The price of oil has really helped plunge this state into recession. So we have $1 billion less in the general fund. It was about $9 billion. Now it's less than $8 billion. That's the tax revenue we have coming into state government. That's one reason we have to make these extremely difficult cuts. You're right. The legislature, in the end, did raise taxes. They raised them, frankly, in the most regressive way possible on the sales tax, a tax where Louisiana is already extremely high. I believe right now, as of April 1st, we're going to have the highest sales tax of any state in the country. And that's when you count state and local. What they didn't do is look at the structure of the state income tax. They didn't take a long look at tax exemptions and tax breaks. And again, they made these things temporary. So we're going to be back here next year and the year after that looking at these issues once again, hopefully with a different result.
We might be back, obviously, in a special session. So the upcoming session ends in the first part of June. The budget begins, the budget year is July 1. So we're assuming we have to cut $800 million, if not more. So, the governor actually talked about that 3-week window. Why don't you take us through that? The different departments, agencies, the regions, everybody needs to figure out what their budget's going to be starting July 1st of this year.
Yeah, well, the legislature, again, comes in on Monday for their regular session, and their main job during that 3-month period is to pass a budget, and they have to do it with this $800 million shortfall. Now, the governor last night, I have no idea what he's going to do, and again, we don't know what's going to happen during the session, but he said last night that he wouldn't rule out having a special session, a second special session, presumably dealing with taxes sometime during the latter part of June. So one scenario, and again, it's just something people are talking about right now, for the legislature to meet in their regular session, adjourn that in the early part of June, and then come back a week or 10 days later for the last 2 weeks of June and maybe try again to pass some revenue to keep next year's budget from having to endure deep and serious cuts. Again, what we learned during the session university leaders, F. King Alexander from LSU, Emory Belton, a lot of these college presidents were up at the legislature every single day because the situation for those campuses is so serious. And they were talking, I mean, I know that a lot was made of this idea that we're going to shut down the football program. That was probably never going to happen. But I think they were deadly serious when they said, if we can't pay for summer school, then student athletes aren't going to be eligible, and we may not be able to field a football team. So I think that there were some very serious issues for higher education. We have to remember Louisiana has cut state support for higher education farther and faster than any state in the country going back to 2008.
Which raises the question, I mean, if you can't raise revenues and if you have to begin the process of cutting, if the schools, LSU, need to start cutting and need to start projecting and hiring or not hiring, I'm just throwing it out, is LSU football, completely on the table for the fall? I mean, if you're going to have to cut, half of it, let's just say, might come out of higher education.
Stephen, I would be beyond shocked if LSU football doesn't take the field in late August or early September. I mean, let's be honest, there's going to be a college football season. It's not going to come to that. But I think it's the damage we're talking about here is more long-term. I mean, how many faculty members are deciding that they're not going to come to LSU because they worry about the future of the university or the future of the program? How many faculty members are leaving LSU and other schools and saying, I don't want to come to Louisiana, take my talents there? How many students are looking at this and deciding, you know what, if I can afford it, I want to go to school out of state because the situation in Louisiana is too troublesome right now, and I worry about what my degree is going to be worth 10 or 20 years from now. These are the kind of things, and that does long-term economic damage to the state. Remember, the reason we have a university system is because when people have college degrees, when people get educated, most of them stay in this state and will create businesses, will create value. The way you move an economy forward is to have an educated, well-trained population that's able to perform the jobs that we have, but also create the jobs of the future. And if you're not doing a good job educating your people, you're doing long-term damage to your economy.
So if we're looking at possibly $800 million in the hole starting July, and let's just assume we do have a special session, what say would the Louisiana Budget Project, how would y'all recommend that we deal with a budget shortfall of, say, $800 million?
Well, I think one of the places you absolutely have to look is the personal income tax side. That's the side that didn't get any attention during this fiscal session. The two main, the state gets revenue from a lot of areas, but by far the two largest sources of revenue for state government are the sales tax and the individual income tax. And we are right now maxed out on the sales tax. We're the highest in the country. We're nowhere close to the highest on individual income tax. And one of the reasons we've had these budget problems is because in 2007 and 2008, when Louisiana had billion-dollar surpluses, we passed more than $800 million in income tax cuts for middle and upper income taxpayers. So I think one of the things we have to do and legislators need to be willing to do is look to personal income taxes and frankly make some very tough decisions. If you're not willing to raise income taxes on middle and upper income taxpayers, on people making $75,000, $100,000, $500,000 a year, if you're not willing to ask those families to pay a little bit more, then you're going to have to ask people to at the other side of the economic spectrum to say, I'm sorry, we can't afford to have a hospital for you when you get sick. We can't afford to have a college for your kids to go to. You're going to have to make some real trade-offs because that's where we've come to. We're out of tricks. There aren't any more rabbits to pull out of a hat. And frankly, there are some things that there were a lot of ideas put out there on the personal income tax side. There are deductions that you can eliminate. For example, Louisiana is one of only 3 states in the country that allows 100% deductibility of federal income taxes. That one deduction alone is worth over $950 million. If you eliminate that deduction, then you have enough money to lower everybody's income tax rates, and you still come out with more revenue. That's one of the things that not only the Budget Project has suggested, but Jim Richardson from LSU has talked about doing that. Even the Tax Foundation has brought that up as a possible solution. There were bills to that effect. They just couldn't get any support in the legislature, especially in the House.